Anytime I reference anything vaguely political or progressive in any of my videos, I'll get comments from people asking why I talk about politics on my channel. And I wanted to address that question, although I should tell you already, just by stating this question aloud, you are probably already imagining a reason why I might do that, why I talk about politics at all, let alone as often as I seem to, on what is ostensibly a D&D YouTube channel. And I'll just say it now, whatever reason you have in your head, it's probably right. Last year, someone reached out to me on Twitter and said that they had seen some of my videos and they thought I was cool, very flattering, and that we'd probably have a good time playing games together. They offered to play with me if we could ever make it work. And that was nice of them, but I was a little bit taken aback by the fact that their avatar was of Pepe the Frog, the cartoon character who was famously co-opted by white supremacists. And while I'm aware that Pepe was a meme for a while before that, and I suppose not every use of Pepe is necessarily bigoted, if you're on Twitter, you're probably online enough to know Pepe's new context. But out of curiosity, kind of hoping that I was wrong, I checked out this person's Twitter page. And boy, oh boy, they were indeed a full-on, Trump-praising, QAnon-loving, death threats against liberals level white supremacist. And while that's obviously a pretty extreme example, it began to occur to me, it's clearly possible that someone could watch one of my videos where I don't say anything overtly political, and where I certainly hope I didn't say anything bigoted, and they would think, hey, that guy seems like he'd get along with me, a person who thinks some pretty hateful stuff about the Jews. Like, how exactly does that happen? Like, what is it about the way I present myself, or the way I look, that might make people think that I would be cool with their white supremacist ideas? What could it be? Now, obviously that person is probably the minority, ironically. I'm sure most of the people who found my channel in the early months weren't, hateful bigots. But apparently some of them were. And I did not want to invite those people to use me as cover, to point to me and say, hey, here's someone we like, because when that happens, you could wind up finding that your channel has a reputation that you're not cool with. So it was really important for me to get out in front of it. It's important to me that my audience actually knows where I stand on the big issues. Because I want people who are not like me, people who are LGBTQ or BIPOC or disabled or neurodivergent or people in other categories that I can't think of or don't even know about yet. I want those people to know that they're welcome, that they can feel safe in my comment section and in my Discord server. So I started making more overt political jokes and references. And it's not exactly like I had never been doing that before. In my very first video on my channel about where to start watching Critical Role, I talked about the extremely minor controversy around Bo's ethnicity from Campaign 2, basically addressing that the art for Bo almost universally depicts her with East Asian characteristics, and that made some people uncomfortable because it kind of makes the character an accidental stereotype of Orientalist tropes. I didn't really talk about how I felt about it, but if you were in the comments, you saw how I felt as I was responding to comments about this question. Basically, if playing as a different real-world ethnicity makes some people uncomfortable, then I think it's reasonable to ask people not to do that in the future, so it's something that I'm personally going to avoid doing in my own games. So, my politics have never exactly been a secret. Also, boy oh boy, to this day, I still get so many comments from people who don't agree that it's a problem that Bo was vaguely East Asian in appearance. Which is fine. People can feel different ways about a topic this complex, and I'm certainly not doing it justice with this short reference to it in this video. But based on the comments, you think that this 30-second example was somehow the core thesis of my 26-minute-long video about Critical Role. But when I started making Trump jokes or referencing that Republicans are bad, hoo boy, people did not know how to handle it. Suddenly, folks were so belligerent that I'd apparently betrayed them, or that I wasn't being inclusive, or just that I was a woke soy boy or whatever. I don't know, I didn't save the comments, but you can probably imagine what some of them were like. But based on those comments, you would think that this 5-second reference to the Republicans was somehow the core thesis of my 25-minute-long video about orcs. Actually, that's a bad example. Most of the comments were about the core thesis of my video. A lot of them still missed the point that I was trying to make, but they were still talking about the subject. I talked about that in last week's faction video. So considering the response I got to my political content, of course I kept doing it. I made no secret of the fact that I'm one of those wokes you hear about on the news, here to woke all over your dragon game and ruin it so only wokes will play, and non-wokes will all leave the hobby. A thing I apparently want. That is, according to the people who can't stand the idea that people who think like me play D&D, and we'll come back to that later. Now, by this point, after more than a year and a half of more than 150 videos, it should be pretty obvious what I believe. Even setting aside some of the videos I've made, which tell the story pretty clearly on their own, I've also discussed how I worked in Hollywood for years, I'm in an interracial marriage, I've got a lonely flans full of naughty stuff, link in the description. You can probably guess my politics. But I also know that every video is somebody's first. People find my channel and don't necessarily go back and binge everything. So yeah, I still make these comments when I think they serve the video, or they make for a relevant analogy, or if I just feel like it's been too long since I reminded people where I stand, so relatively new subscribers will know who I am and how I feel about these topics. And honestly, a lot of these commenters aren't even saying anything specific about their politics. They're just saying some version of shut up about politics. They just don't want to hear about politics on a D&D channel. So it doesn't matter what politics they hold as individuals. Right? Well, first of all, no, that's not true, and I'll explain why in a little bit, but let's pretend for a minute that it is true, just for the sake of argument. Let's actually respond to this comment in good faith. One of the things these people basically say is, I didn't come here for politics. I came to hear you talk about D&D. Ah yes, the completely apolitical hobby, centered on a game where we pretend to be strangers working together for a common good, overthrowing tyrants who menace the little people. Or, if you'd like, a game where you take on the role of fortune seekers who try to gain status and clout by gaining more wealth than anybody else in the world. Or, if you'd prefer, a game where you fight to protect the status quo by slaying members of tribal cultures who look different from you. All these things are, famously, apolitical concepts. But sure, some people don't want to hear about politics in a D&D video. But some people do. Some people actually want to hear that the person on the little screen agrees with them, because they want to know that his comment section and his Discord server are going to be welcoming and inclusive spaces for people who are members of minority groups that have been experiencing a lot of oppression and strife, particularly online. But okay, some of these commenters are just saying my channel could probably grow a lot faster if I didn't talk about politics. And you know what? That's a possibility. It's not remotely lost on me that some people unsubscribe when they hear me say that trans people are human beings or whatever else they think has no business being in a D&D video for whatever reason. I mean, they straight up tell me that they unsubscribe, so of course it's not lost on me that I'm losing subscribers. But the folks who say that they think I would just grow faster if I wasn't so political are making a few major assumptions. First, they're assuming that hearing about politics turns everybody off, and my channel will stagnate or lose followers. This is essentially the go woke, go broke argument, which we'll talk about later. But also, these commenters assume that's what I would want. They assume that I would just want a large audience that is not actually invested at all in what I really believe, outside of my very limited opinions on specifically what they think is relevant to talking about D&D the way they expect to hear me talk about it. But that's not necessarily true. I don't want endless growth if it means that some of the people who watch my channel radically disagree with what I believe in a way that makes it extremely difficult to have conversations about important topics, especially when they are relevant to my videos. And that's to say nothing of the fact that if people disagree with certain of my politics, then welcoming them into my comment sections or my Discord server could actively make those spaces more toxic towards people who, always get blasted by toxicity on the internet, which has basically been the experience for anybody who is a member of any minority or oppressed group. Because here's the thing. This stuff matters. Now listen, I love to talk about stuff that doesn't matter. If you get me going on the right bullshit topic, I could talk endlessly. I could probably talk for an hour minimum about the 2003 Daredevil movie. And I like talking about those things. I'm well informed. I certainly know a lot more about the lore of the TV show Lost than I do about the statistics behind the gender pay gap or what the process is like to actually receive gender-affirming care. I could fill a video essay with the reasons I prefer Thor 2 over Thor 3. Or I would if Scott from NerdSync hadn't beaten me to it and done it better. That's a great video. You should watch it. And if you like talking about this kind of stuff, cool. I bet we get along fine at a party. But there are things that matter more. There are things that actually make people's lives harder. And we should be able to talk about these things and how to solve them. We can still talk about the geek shit. That's fine. We can, in fact, do both. That NerdSync video about the Thor movies is actually about women's bodily autonomy. Seriously, it is a fantastic video. Go watch it. Also, even if you look like me and have all of my privileges, visible and invisible, this stuff can still affect you. It does still affect you. Have you ever wanted to play D&D with a woman? I mean, if the answer is no, you're an idiot. Women are neat. But if the answer is yes, then you should do what you can to make sure that they have access to reproductive rights. Have you ever played D&D with a BIPOC person, or just wanted to? Maybe you can avoid voting for the people who seem to constantly strip away their right to vote. Do you want to have kids someday, and want those kids to be able to live long enough to have kids? Then maybe you should not support the only political party on the planet that doesn't believe that climate change is real. So yeah, I want to talk about how I feel about these subjects so people know where I stand, and what I expect from my community. And you know what's interesting? I've never lost more subscribers than I've gained. The most disliked video on my channel, the first one where I openly referenced that Republicans are bad, and the topic itself was also pretty controversial. It was about the evil orcs, which plenty of the comments were focused on. That video still has almost 10 times more likes than dislikes, to the tune of almost 1,000 more people. I didn't know that off the top of my head. I had to look it up. I don't care about whether my videos get likes or dislikes. I'm telling you that, so you'll think that means I don't care about the algorithm, because I'm a more evolved YouTuber who's above all of that. And that's a lie. I try not to let it make all my decisions on the channel, and there's a lot of stuff that I don't look at all, but if a video ranks 10 out of 10 in performance compared to the recent videos, I don't let it ruin my day, but it will bum me out. Now I'm telling you that so you'll feel sympathy for me. Everything I do is calculated. This is all artifice. Anyway, the point is, according to the data I have access to, most of my viewers either don't seem to mind it when I talk about politics, or they like it. And you know what's funny? With every new video where I make an offhand reference to politics, I get a lot fewer annoyed comments each time, at least in the first few days, when the video is mainly being seen by my subscribers. When my J.K. Rowling video came out, I hardly got any toxic comments for the first few days, which means that a lot of the transphobes had already unsubscribed long ago. Which means the self-selection process is working. But also, those commenters who say they don't want to hear about politics in my videos, they're not telling the truth. Well, they might think they are, but they're not. Let me put it this way. Every time I make a single fleeting reference to conservatives or Republicans or Trump, I get a bunch of these comments. Though, like I said, fewer and fewer every time, at least when the video first goes live. But when I made a joke about Democrats, nothing. Crickets. Nobody's ever commented on those videos asking me to stop talking about politics when I criticize the Democrats. And that feels interesting. I mean, maybe that's not true after Thursday's video, but that's a whole ass video about politics. I'd honestly be kind of surprised if I don't get any comments about, the content that makes half of that video. But yeah, maybe it kind of seems like these commenters don't actually have a problem with politics. They just have a problem with certain politics. And this is where I have to point out that these politics are not that controversial. A joke about Trump isn't controversial. He won his first election without winning the popular vote, and then he's been political poison for every election since then. He's a very famously unpopular man. A reference to how Republicans are actively trying to undermine democracy and destroy human rights isn't in any way untrue. They've been working very hard to steal the next election, and they absolutely hate trans people. And that seems like a human rights issue, doesn't it? Speaking of which, some of my comments aren't political. Trans rights shouldn't even be a political issue at all, but it's only been politicized by Republican politicians who want somebody to blame for all of society's problems. Similarly, when I make a video where I say racism in movies is bad, or racism in games is bad, that's also not politics. When I reference an ableist joke I'm not proud of, I got so many comments about how my reaction to my own shitty joke somehow means the current state of the D&D community is in decline. Is that in any way about politics? So, really, these commenters just don't like things they consider to be woke. And now, and I'm so sorry about this, but I'm going to have to talk about the word woke for more than a little bit. For those who aren't aware, in black culture, woke originally meant being aware of the oppression against black people. I'm so obviously not an expert here, but it seems like it meant, hey, you need to remember that it's not safe for us out there, even when it seems like it might be, so keep your head on a swivel. Then in the mid to late 2010s, when the word was appropriated by white liberals who wanted to feel good about themselves for how progressive they were, woke basically evolved to mean aware of and advocating to fix any kind of systemic unfairness. Now, this is when I actually started to dislike the word. Not because liberals are annoying, although, yeah, sometimes. But instead, it's because this usage implied being aware of systemic unfairness is a binary, and it's not. For example, after 2020's Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of us were far more aware of the issues that black people face in this country. We were woke according to the earliest definition, and certainly more woke about the black experience with police brutality. But because the definition now basically included any form of systemic unfairness or oppression, you might have become woke about the black struggle, maybe, but you could still be oblivious about the issues faced by Asian Americans, or disabled people, or neurodivergent people, or gay people, or transgender people. Essentially, I didn't like this use of the word woke because it implied the work was done, and people could feel proud of themselves for now being woke. But the work wasn't necessarily done. To me, this definition of woke implies that there is always more to learn, more ways your personal biases can be challenged and broken down, and so nobody could actually claim to be woke because there was just too much to learn, too much to be aware of. And to be clear, that's a good thing. We should always be learning and growing. But it just meant that I felt like the word had outlived its usefulness. And then, by the 2020s, conservatives got their hooks into the word and redefined it to mean pushing an agenda to make everything worse by making it more inclusive, which obviously makes everything worse automatically. And now the word basically means nothing, and we can probably retire it entirely. Side note, this definition is the one used when people claim go woke, go broke, because they assume that people adding diversity into modern works of art are doing so because of an agenda and not because they just wanted to, and that regardless of whether there was an agenda or not, that more diversity is always bad and that most audiences don't want it, which is why they argue any woke movies or TV shows will go broke and not find a wide audience. And while we could absolutely discuss whether any major movie made by any huge corporation can actually be all that woke, it's also worth noting that Barbie, one of the only vaguely woke movies of the summer, made almost $1.5 billion at the box office. So anybody still saying go woke or go broke is absolutely living in a fantasy world. You don't have to take them seriously. They don't know what they're talking about. There are people who truly think that I'm claiming that people who don't agree with me about these political topics that I discuss in my videos should be forced out of the hobby. That everybody who is woke is trying to get rid of the old guard. But I've never said that. I don't know anybody who's ever said that. In fact, I've always said the exact opposite. This is D&D, my man. What you do at your table doesn't impact me at all. I'm going to give you my opinions in my videos, and sometimes that means that I'll make recommendations for how I think you can improve your game by, for example, using safety tools in a session 0, or by making your orcs more nuanced than just some generic mindless monsters. But if you vehemently disagree with me and you want to keep running your game exactly the same way, why would I care? Do your thing. I've always made the exact same point. If you and your players are having fun, and you know for a fact that nobody has any issues with the game as it's being played, then you're good. Of course, I personally think the best way to know for a fact is to ask your players. And guess what? That's all safety tools are. They're a framework to help have these conversations in a way that can help keep emotions from running high when discussing difficult subject matter. But you can, and you should, play your game in whatever way you and your friends find fun. But of course, the reason these commenters say that we're trying to get rid of them is because they're projecting. Because they want to get rid of us. They say so. They say things like, if you need safety tools, you shouldn't play D&D. If an ableist joke bothers you, you shouldn't play D&D. It seems like they're the ones who actually don't want us to play the game, despite the fact that, again, we'll never be at a table together, unless you choose to play with us. That's how the game works. But the good news is, at least in my little corner of the hobby, these sorts of people are a vanishingly small minority, and they certainly don't represent most of the people in my comment sections or in my Discord server. And you know why? Because I talk about politics. Also, not for nothing, but none of these comments were ever as harsh as when I made a video about why I didn't like the Forgotten Realms as the default 5e campaign setting. Now, those were some angry people. Thank you so much for watching. If you feel like you like my channel, and hopefully you have a pretty good sense by now of whether or not you do, that's the whole point of this series, then please like and subscribe. If you want to support me financially, consider signing up for my Patreon if you're able to do so and you think I'm worth your while. Join my Discord server to hang out with other awesome people, follow me on Twitch to catch my live streams, and sign up for my newsletter, which I just need to get better about sending those out. If you didn't see the video where I laid out a bunch more of my political beliefs, and if you're in the mood to hear more from me, go check that video out right here. Until next time, play fair and have fun.